I'm about to offend some friends in this video. But listen, I've got some strong opinions about the Presidium Gem Tester, and I think they're worth saying and maybe worth listening to. If you really like this machine and you just want to skip past all the negative and keep your bias, go ahead and skip to the end. If not, you want to hear what I have to say? Well, stay tuned. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, I'm Laura and I've been interested in jewelry and gemstones basically my entire life. The obsession started when I was very young. I used to go to the malls and collect all the little catalogs of jewelry, and then I would take those catalogs home and I would circle everything I wanted in those catalogs, and then I'd throw them away because I was a kid and I couldn't afford any of that stuff. When I was older and actually had a job, I started my own little jewelry collection, which has just gotten bigger and bigger over the years. Eventually, I started reselling things on my own of jewelry, some pieces that I just didn't wear anymore, and then eventually I just started buying and selling to other people in the community. I've been watching jewelry sellers for a long time right here on YouTube, years, and there was something I noticed. A lot of them use the same machine, and that is the Presidium II Gem Tester. The first person I saw who ever used one of those, well, I'm sure there was others, but the first person I noticed to ever use a Presidium was Margaret from Texas Gal Treasures. And I just thought that was pretty much the coolest thing ever, to just have this little device that you just touch to a stone and it tells you what it is. And I was like, I need that in my life. So after I made a few sales, I had a goal in mind of my profit. And once I hit that goal, I was going to get myself a Presidium Gem Tester. And I actually did end up doing that. At a glance, these machines look amazing. Very simple to use. You just turn it on and get to it. And it wasn't long after I owned one of my own that I realized that it really feels like quite an unnecessary piece of equipment. So before we talk about the machine itself and what happened to mine, because no, I no longer own it, we got to talk about how it works, because I have seen over and over again people describe as they're using it how it works, and it's wrong. The biggest misconception that I've heard about this machine is that it measures the hardness of a stone. That is very inaccurate, and I'm here to set the record straight on that. It does not measure hardness. The only way you can measure hardness is by scratching a stone. Basically, the way it works is there is the Mohs scale of hardness, which has a whole scale laid out of basically how easy it is to scratch a stone. You have things on one end, like a piece of chalk that's going to be like 3.5 on the scale, all the way up to diamonds, which is a 10. That's as hard as it gets. Right up there at the end. Nothing, no other natural mineral can scratch that diamond. And the only way to know if it's going to scratch or not is to take a harder material and scratch the softer material. So if you have nothing that can scratch the diamond, okay, we've identified that as a diamond. If everything scratches it, okay, well, it's got to be some sort of mineral down there in the, 1, 2, 3 range. So what the Presidium does test is thermoelectric conductivity. And basically what we're doing is putting an electrical charge into this probe, creates a little bit of heat, and you put that probe up to your gemstone. What it calculates, and no, I don't know the specifics of how the internal components of that work, but it basically measures how conductive that gemstone is. If heat goes through it really easily, it's highly conductive, and that's what sets that meter up all the way. Once again, diamonds, highly conductive, sends that thing all the way to the end. Moissanite, very similar. It's not quite at diamond level, but it's close enough that they could be mistaken for each other if you're just using one of these machines. If it hardly moves at all, it's something way less conductive. Something at the other end of the spectrum when you're looking at one of these dials is glass. Any fake gemstones, like a plastic gemstone or something like that, is not going to conduct. It will probably just sit right there at the end on the meter without budging at all. So depending on where that needle falls on the scale, it will give you an approximation of what the gemstone actually is. And yes, you heard that correctly. And this is my biggest problem with this machine. It is an approximation. It is not guaranteed. Let me say that again. This is not a color gemstone tester. It is not. It is a diamond tester. And that is how legally they can get away with saying that this is a gemstone tester, because it does accurately identify diamonds. Everything else on there is its best guess. It even says in the instructions manual, if you open it up and read the whole thing, it's a gem estimator, diamond tester. So this thing can be inaccurate. And if you are just a layperson using it, you're not very good at your gemstones and you're relying on this machine, that is an enormous problem. If you're not very good at identifying gemstones, this thing is going to cause you trouble. If your gemstone is a larger cut, a smaller cut, this can skew your result. If it's got inclusions in it, that can skew your result. If the temperature of the room is different, one place in your house versus another, your result can be skewed. There's just too many variables, and the conductivity of the stone does not necessarily offset those other factors. So you could be getting false readings. And you may have dealt with this yourself if you've owned one, or you may have seen this happen with other people when they're using it. They're like, well, it looks like this, but it's saying it's this. It still may be your gut instinct as to what it is. It's just the needle is confused for one reason or another. This is not my only problem with this thing, though. My other enormous problem is there are 16 gemstones on this thing. 16. That is a teeny tiny fraction of the gemstones out there in the world. And it's only a handful of the ones that you might find in jewelry. Some things that aren't even on there are things like morganite, labradorite, onyx, kunzite, and if my memory serves correctly, I don't even think perido's on there, and that's an extremely common gemstone. We're going to touch on that a little more later when we talk about another tool that I think you should consider purchasing. But there is yet another problem I have with the gemstones that are actually on it, and that is where they're located on the meter. If you look at the picture of the dial, you'll notice something. A lot of these gemstones, they overlap. That black bar you see is what they say the gemstone might be if the needle's touching it. Well, there's a lot of overlap on this thing. Basically, every single one of them's got something that it overlaps with that it could be confused with. Do you have, for example, a topaz, like a blue topaz or a blue sapphire? Who knows? Sapphire comes in literally every shade except for red, and then it's a ruby. Topaz comes in a multitude of colors as well. How are you going to know which is which if it falls on both of those lines? And that's a huge difference in value too, because a very nice quality sapphire worth a heck of a lot more than the same color topaz in a lot of instances. Maybe the needle drops down a touch and now it's over the topaz and spinel line. Same problem. A lot of times those two gemstones fall in the same color range, and spinel is going to be a lot more valuable, generally speaking, than your topaz. Are you confident enough to be able to tell the difference between a green tourmaline and a green amethyst? Because guess what? Those lines overlap too. So you see my problem. And as a matter of fact, this leads me right into one of the major reasons I actually purchased this machine. I was hoping that it would help me with a problem I've had for a very long time. I got a ring in a jewelry lot, like, I don't even know, ages ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago by this point. It's like gold over sterling, heavy, weighty ring, and it's got this deep purple gemstone set into it, which I feel very confident is a natural gemstone, but I cannot for the life of me figure out if it's a tanzanite or if it's an amethyst. And so I thought, okay, once I get this gem tester, I'm finally going to solve the mystery of which is which. And so I got it, went to test it, and guess what? The needle hit both lines, tanzanite and amethyst. The ring still lives on my dresser to this day. I still don't know what it is. So is that the reason I finally returned the Presidium? Nope. There is one more problem that we have to talk about with this thing that is actually a rather huge issue, and that is how janky it is. For lack of a better term, I cannot tell you how many people that I have known who has had issues with this machine. Usually it's a calibration issue. You go to test something and it goes up a little bit and falls back down. And it doesn't actually accurately test known gemstones. My biggest problem with it is that the needle started on glass. It's supposed to fall completely down to the side of the dial, but this thing started on glass and it would not sit below glass. So even if I had something totally fake, a piece of plastic like I mentioned earlier, or something like that, it was already sitting at glass. It couldn't read anything less than that. And then from there, I didn't know if it was accurately moving the needle in the right place or not. So I had to return it because it was broken out of the box. And if you go on these Presidium reviews, like on Amazon or another website with reviews, a lot of people have that problem, broken out of the box. And guess what? If this thing actually does need repair and you're past the return window, it might need some, like, I don't know, some actual mechanical failure, or it needs to be recalibrated internally or something like that. Guess who's paying the shipping to send it back to Singapore? That's right. Yo, have fun with that. Now, to be fair, I haven't researched it, but as far as I know, that's the only place that you can send it back to get fixed from the original manufacturer. So those are all the issues that I take with Presidium. So what do I suggest instead? Honestly, your eyes are the best tool you can have. And experience is going to be far better than any of these machines. I can't tell you how many times that I've seen people correctly guess stones and then second guess themselves because the machine said they were wrong. The machine is wrong. Not always, but lots of the time it is. So look at known gemstones, study them, know what to look for. Jeweler's Loop, also an awesome tool that will help you get up close and personal with a gemstone, identify things like inclusions in the stone. For example, diamonds, almost all, unless you're dealing with a super high-end flawless diamond, which is like very rare, they always have inclusions in them. You're going to see little dots of carbon in them, like little black spots. Or sometimes you have what are called wisps or something like that kind of look like a little smoky little wisp inside of the diamond. There will be inclusions. If it's fairly sparkly, doesn't have any inclusions, it might be a CZ. It's possible it's a moissanite as well. There's always that possibility, but it's probably not a diamond. Also, little diamond chips, things like that, the way they reflect the light is different. So for example, if you have like a piece of cut glass, it will sparkle. I do see like rainbow color sparkles in glass cut pieces, but when the light hits it and it reflects, there's just something about diamonds. It's like crazy reflective surface. Their luster is crazy good, and it's like a white sparkle across the surface. Whereas something glass absorbs it a little more, it still reflects, but it's just something that you're going to learn over time. There are things like peridot, for example, that has inclusions. So that's just natural in the stone and something pretty much all peridot has. In fact, I don't even know if you can get peridot in like a completely clear inclusion-free cut. I don't think that, as far as I know, that's like not a thing. Generally speaking, peridot has little tiny inclusions in it. It has these little internal structures that kind of look like lily pads inside of the stone. So there's something else to look for, end of sentence. Lots of natural gemstones will have inclusions. However, if you're looking inside of a stone and it's got bubbles in it, it's possible you're actually looking at glass. Bubbles would be indicator of a glass piece. Something to be aware of, but something you're not going to be able to see necessarily with the naked eye, but a jeweler's loop can be your best friend. But yeah, again, my best advice is just to look at your own jewelry that you know the gemstones and just study it. There are things that are going to be off about gemstones that are fake. The color will be a little too saturated. Like for example, going back to peridot, I've seen lots of faux peridot that kind of has like a more of a olive green tone to it, and that's just not how peridot is supposed to look. Amethyst too, sometimes you get very clear amethyst, lots of rainbow internal sparkle and refraction going on, and that's not really typical of amethyst. It usually has kind of like purple and red flashes in it, not like a rainbow spectrum. So you may be looking at a faux piece of amethyst or glass cut amethyst, something like that. Another tip I'll tell you to look out for is to see what kind of metal the stone is set into, and that can tip you off as to whether it's a faux stone or not, because you're not going to have this really high quality, like, I don't know, a giant emerald or sapphire, ruby, diamond, any of the precious ones generally aren't going to be set into jeweler's brass. Just saying, that's not usually a thing. Yes, you will get the lower quality ones set into sterling silver. That's pretty common. But if it's gold, for example, you're probably going to have a nicer gemstone set into that metal. Not always, but it does help you identify it as a gemstone versus a faux stone. And to that end, also the quality and craftsmanship of the metal itself can tip you off a little bit, because sometimes you'll have a mass-produced molded silver piece that has kind of little globs of silver here and there. It's still sterling, but it's not really high quality, and they may not put the best quality stones in that piece. So admittedly, learning stones by eye and with a loupe, it's time consuming. It's going to take you a while to learn these things, but it's going to be invaluable to you if you are either a collector or a seller of jewelry, because you're going to be able to eventually go out, do your own hunting for this stuff, and be able to identify it out in the field, as it were. And you're not going to necessarily be had by other sellers, because you're going to know that doesn't quite look right for a diamond. I don't know if I believe you. My point is that you're going to be able to do this over time. And comment below if you're one of these people that you've spotted the fakies out in the real world, because I'm just curious. I really feel it's something that everybody can do with practice, handling your own jewelry, looking at it, getting familiar with it. You can do it too. What if you're like me and you're kind of a gem nerd and you kind of want to know for certain and don't want to just make like your best guess? Well, that is when I recommend this little tool here, the Gem Refractometer. This is super duper cool, very interesting tool. I'll pull it out so you can see what it looks like. This very interesting tool is going to run you about $80 to $100 depending on where you're looking, versus the Presidium that's going to be in the $270 to $400 range, again depending on where you're looking. I'm not going to go into the great detail of how to use this, but I will tell you in a nutshell what it does is it measures the way that light bends through a gemstone. That's called its refraction. So when a light enters a stone, it bounces off of the other side of it, and it either bounces in one straight line, or sometimes it splits into two. And what this does is it shows you on a numbered scale where the light coming out of the stone hits on that scale. This gives you a way more accurate measure of what that gemstone is. So your gemstone would sit here, and you can do this with gems that are set into jewelry. You need a little chemical component here. I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called. I think it's just a refractive index fluid. I think it's just called RI fluid. Put it on there, get your gemstone so it makes a nice seal. Close it, or just go in a dark room, put the flashlight in on this end, and then you look in here on this end. Well, you're not going to be able to see it on the camera, but I'll try to remember to put a picture on the screen of the type of thing that you might see when you look through this lens. Super neat. I find it absolutely fascinating. If you're a gem nerd, this guy is so fun to use, and if you have time to do it too. But just to prove my point on why this machine is way more accurate and interesting and worth it versus the Presidium, Presidium will tell you its approximation on 16 gemstones. This is a list of what the refraction gem refractor can do. This, and this, and these. Oh, and there's another sheet. Okay, see what I'm saying? Post-processing, Laura, here really quick, just to add in this little caveat that I totally forgot to mention. The refractometer cannot measure diamond. Diamond's refractive index is higher than it can read, and that is actually just for these particular models that people typically get. You can get them that'll read higher, but this one does not read it. So if you are testing something that may be diamond and it's not showing up on the chart, that's actually kind of more of your indicator that it is a diamond. The fact that you can't get a reading out of it with this particular instrument. However, what I personally do is I just have a diamond tester, just a straight up cheap $20 diamond tester. They work pretty darn well. And that in combination with this, you're covered. Something that both of these things do have in common is they're going to give you the same readout for certain stones. So regardless of what you use to try to identify your gemstones, you're going to need to have a basic idea of what gemstone you're dealing with. For example, all quartz are going to have the same refractive index. And all quartz on the Presidium, depending on temperature and inclusions and blah, 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 generally are going to sit on that same quartz line. So you still need to know what you're looking at is, a morion versus a smoky quartz versus an amethyst versus a citrine versus a prasiolite and so on and so forth. Beryl is another example of that. If you're looking at a stone and you don't know what it is, but it refracts as a beryl, you're going to still need to know the difference between aquamarine, emerald, morganite, heliodor, so on and so forth. So with all that said, despite the many flaws of the Presidium, I still think it could be a useful tool. One thing it's definitely good at is being able to differentiate between the common diamond and diamond simulate stones. That's going to be CZ or glass, which by the way are not the same in any way, shape, or form, but they do read the same on the Presidium, I do believe. A white sapphire and or a diamond. It cannot tell you if it's a diamond or a moissanite. There is actually a tool, a handheld probe, that can differentiate between moissanite and diamond. But the Presidium, despite being as expensive as it is, cannot tell the difference. And furthermore, just for the record, and this goes across the board on everything, you cannot tell lab-created stones apart from a natural stone. That's very difficult to do because they have the same, as they always say on JTV, same physical, chemical, and optical properties, and that is true. So the Presidium, the refractor, they can't tell. Just wanted to throw that out there. The other thing a Presidium can do that we definitely cannot do with the refractometer and may not be able to do with your eye is look at a gemstone up close, whereas the Presidium can use the probe and actually reach it. Their probe is like the smallest in the industry as far as testing probes go. And so it can get in there to a lot of the tiny ones and at least be able to determine if it's a real diamond or not. It is very good at that. The other thing I'll say is if you aren't confident at all in your gemstone identification, if you just simply cannot get the hang of identifying gemstones, no matter how much you try to familiarize yourself with them, this can be a good tool to set you in the right direction. Personally, I do generally feel pretty confident in identifying a stone as being real or not, but there are situations where I can't tell. It is glass and it looks so much like a real stone that I just can't tell. This actually, a real life scenario that's happening was one of my more recent purchases from another YouTuber. I bought a pair of hoop earrings from Crystal with Moon Goddess Treasure, and she's actually got a Presidium. These earrings had blue stones in them, like small blue stones around the hoop. And oh my gosh, they were a dead ringer for topaz, blue topaz. It looked just like topaz. And she had the tester to show that it was in fact glass. If she didn't have that, I would have bought them as topaz and no one would have been any of the wiser, but it's not, it's not what they are. And so if you're trying to actually sell things, this is a great tool to be able to say that, yes, this is a genuine gemstone, or no, this is actually just a glass cut. Most of the time, I'm not going to say always, because there are a lot of costume pieces and things like that where glass is totally fine and people value that, and those things have a lot of value to them on their own, being glass. But a lot of time, especially when you're talking about fine jewelry, people want natural gemstones. And if you have this machine, at the very least, it can differentiate between a glass and a gemstone. It may be a little inaccurate telling you which gemstone that is, but at the very least you can say genuine gemstone. So there is that, and that's kind of a big deal. The other thing that the Presidium has that the refractometer does not is the ability to test round stones. Now the refractometer can test a loose cabochon gemstone if you flip it on its back and it has the flat surface contact. But round stones, or porous stones for that matter, things with some micro pores in the surface, doesn't do so good at that. It needs that flat, good seal between the gemstone and the glass. And for that reason, the Presidium does beat the refractometer. because you can't even use the refractometer with those. So one more point for the Presidium side of things is the fact that it's super duper easy to use. It's plug and play. You just plug that thing in or use the batteries and push it up to your stone and read out the readout. It does not get any easier than that. The refractometer, on the other hand, takes some time to learn. There is a method to it. You do have to rotate the stone. It helps if you have a polarizer lens over it to identify the stone. But your accuracy with that is going to be far and wide better than the Presidium. So it's a trade-off, but refractometer, much more time consuming, 1 to learn and 2 to use. My last point to make about the Presidium, and arguably the most important point about the Presidium, is that it is a well-known tool. As I said in the beginning of this video, I've seen lots of resellers use it, and I know if you're watching this video, if you've gotten to this point, you're probably one of those people that either use it or want one or have seen it in use by another jewelry reseller. And because of that, this machine automatically has credibility because it's familiar, regardless of if it sucks or not. People are familiar with it. They've seen it used. They've seen it used by very big channels like Texas Gal Treasures. And it tends to make people like respect the results of it a bit more because they're already familiar with it. People like things they're familiar with. So when they see this machine come out, confirms whatever, they're happy. Your customer is happy. And if you can show a potential customer that the stone is right here, testing as real, I can't say, oh yeah, I can see and hear that it's refracting, it's got a bifringence of this range, and they can't physically see that. It's nice to be able to display it for a customer. That right there is going to give you added value to your piece because they see the proof right there in front of them, and you can't beat that. My only suggestion is, I highly suggest that if you aren't 100% certain what gemstone you're looking at, don't tell your buyer that's what it is. If you're using the gem tester, say, I have this blue stone, it's testing as XYZ. And that is just a personal thing, and that's just my own little hangups with integrity. I just think it's very important to disclose as much as you can to your potential buyer. Because if you don't, if they take it somewhere, that person who bought the blue spinel and then they take it to a jeweler later and find out it's just a topaz is not going to be thrilled with you. So just to cover your own butt, as they say, just disclose this is testing as this. I'm fairly certain it's this. Unless you're like totally sure. That's just my 2 cents and my opinion on that. All right, y'all, I think that's about all I have to say on the Presidium Gem Tester. But now I'm curious, what is your all's experience with this machine? Have you ever used one before? Are you thinking about getting one? Are you thinking about getting a gem refractometer now because it looks like a lot of fun? Let me know in the comments what you think, where you think I've gone wrong in all my opinions. Argue with me down below. No, just kidding. But I would love to hear your opinion. Do you think this machine is worth it? Do you think this machine is worth minimum $270 for 16 gemstone readouts? I'm saying no. But if I did get one again, I would do some things a little differently. I would, right off the bat, test stones that I know are what they are, and then I would mark them on the dial myself with some sort of, I don't know, sticky notes above it where the arrow is pointing or something. I don't know. I got to modify it somehow. I just don't trust it. I don't trust it, you guys. But I trust it to at least say that a stone is real. So there's that. But you guys tell me what you think. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. I truly appreciate y'all being here, especially if you've made it this far in the video. And a special thank you to my channel members, and especially Jennifer Brown, who as of now is still my only top tier channel member. And yeah, special shout out to her. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I hope you are doing really well down there in Florida. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Appreciate y'all being here. And I hope to see y'all on the next one. Bye.